Dan Rubenstein, we have our national championship set. It is going to be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It is going to be the Ohio State Buckeyes. Notre Dame won on Thursday night by a 27-24 score, a nail-biter. We'll talk about that.
Yes.
We just got done watching Ohio State take it to Texas by a 28-14 score.
Ooh.
We will obviously talk about that as well. It is set. The tournament has one game left. My good friend, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm good. I think I'm excited. I'm trying to corral all my emotions all here at once, but it has felt like a longer playoff because it's been a longer playoff. But we got two very exciting games deep into fourth quarters, which has not always been the case as we've watched semifinals in the playoff era. So it seems like a win of a past 24 hours, that it's a win for drama. It's a win for the spirit of competition tie. I'm great.
Absolutely. So for those of you out there watching, wondering how you can be part of the Verballerhood, of course, verballers.com is the Patreon where we always encourage people to go and check it out. You can go to solidverbal.com/Discord as well. I opened up a channel for people who want to talk about the games. That'll be open up through the national championship if that's your thing. Of course, we are still playing Bowl Bingo. We're going to have a new card that goes live on Monday morning. That is playbowlbingo.com. And last but certainly not least, hit follow, hit subscribe wherever it is you are listening or watching so that you don't miss any of our episodes. We got a big week here in the Verballerhood as we get ready for this game. Yes, my Notre Dame Fighting Irish are in the game. I guess I had 100% chance of getting at least one team into this national championship. I will admit I was very conflicted when we did our stream on Thursday night.
Yeah.
And it hit me about midway through. I probably should not have done the stream at all because it kind of bottled me up a little bit from expressing my pure fan emotion. But it was a good game. It was a nail biter. It was a pleasure to share the field of battle with you these last two nights.
Yeah.
How would you like to recap these games? Where would you like to start?
I think we start where it's fresh. I think we start with Ohio State taking down Texas 28-14, although the actual rhythm of that game was a lot closer than that final score, of course. Huge play at the end with a strip sack on Quinn Ewers and Jack Sawyer taking it. Was it 92 yards? Was that the final
And it was
number?
like 83 yards.
83
it was a lot.
yards.
It was many yards. Yeah, the scoop and score for Jack Sawyer, which put this one out of reach. Texas, of course, had the ball down. It was first and goal from like the 1 or 2 yard line. They had the unfortunate situation where they tried to run kind of like a pitch play or something to the outside that Ohio State was able to sniff out. That pushed them back a little bit further, put them a little bit behind the chains. And before you knew it, it was fourth and goal. It was a tough play, strip sack, strip fumble, scoop and score. Jack Sawyer takes it the other way to put this one away for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, it was another play, another chapter on the Texas red zone struggle bus this year for the Longhorns. And you know what, by the way, another lesson down there, because it was a sort of an extended moment for Texas down near the goal line. If you've got to interfere to prevent a touchdown, interfere to prevent a touchdown. Ohio State did twice. It absolutely paid off. The Buckeyes live to face more downs instead of giving up scores, and they get that negative play. And as everybody figured, the most explosive touchdown play for Ohio State came with the ball in the hands of Jack Sawyer.
Sawyer.
Of all players. An incredible performance from really both of these teams, with Texas starting out as slowly as they did, especially on offense, with Quinn Ewers looking just a little gun shy, stepping into bad pockets, overthrowing dudes. And for as good as Will Howard looked, he wasn't completing a ton of passes downfield. Some his fault, some not his fault, but he was moving the ball. Ohio State was moving the ball. Their biggest offensive play came as sort of a one-off right before the half. Right. It was a back and forth. I think there were 8 straight drives with punts. Was that what it was in the first half?
It was something like that, yeah.
It was 7 or 8 straight drives with punts, as Ohio State was sloppy in terms of discipline and penalties. And, there were questionable calls here and there, but by and large, I think the better team won because Ohio State clearly made more plays, though they made those plays in ways that they weren't those first 2 games. And that was being more patient, that
Yeah.
was longer drives, that was winning moments. Arguably the biggest moment was that 4th down run from Will Howard in the second half that got eaten up by the turf monster, but they still managed to score on that drive. It was an impressive performance because it was Ohio State winning in a, for us as viewers recently, new kind of way. It was a
Well,
Michigan, explosive Tennessee, explosive Oregon, and patient Texas.
so this game didn't go unlike what we discussed in the preview.
Right.
And we, I think, did a pretty good job of unpacking the differences facing a Texas defense versus some of the other defenses that Ohio State has played. And our assumption going into this one was that Texas would do a lot of what we saw tonight, which is shade over the top. Don't let Ohio State beat you for any deep throws. Try to scheme Jeremiah Smith out as much as humanly possible.
Yeah.
They did an exemplary job of that in this game, Dan. He had 3 targets, but just 1 catch for 3 yards. They took Jeremiah Smith completely out of this game. The problem when you're facing Ohio State is it's not just Jeremiah Smith. He might be the headliner, but Carnell Tate, I believe, led Ohio State with receptions, had the most targets of anybody. Of course, Emeka Ibuka is still out there. They got him a little bit involved in the run game. You mentioned the one-off from Trey Henderson before the half. He had some explosivity in his game. And Quinshawn Judkins, who wasn't necessarily the most explosive guy out there, but they used him to great effect down near the goal line.
Yes.
So they just found a really good way to use all of their pieces, not the least of which is, yes, Will Howard. They're not using him a ton in the running game. They're only pulling it out when they have to, but it was a really big deal when Will Howard was able to scamper for a first down late in the game and extend a drive for the Buckeyes. So there's just so many different ways that they can beat you that it makes it hard to key on any one thing. To Texas's credit, though, they did execute that game plan, and I think they did a pretty good job. They were able to keep most of the Ohio State passing game underneath, not get beaten too deep over the top. They were able, with their front 4, as the game wore on especially, to get some pressure on Will Howard to try and change the rhythm of his throws. They were able to do a lot defensively that I thought was really outstanding that we have not seen most teams do against Ohio State, certainly throughout the course of this college football playoff. So I give the defense a lot of credit. I don't think the offense looked particularly bad either. The problem was just that they were going up against a really good Ohio State defense. Again, that can beat you so many different ways, right?
Yes. The answer is yes. But, and it's probably not a conversation piece for today, but Texas is scoring 15, 17, 19, 14 points in their biggest games.
Yeah.
And so,
well, that's a separate conversation. You're right.
Like, it's what, 17 against Texas A&M, 19 and 15 against Georgia. Like, it seems Texas is able to start strong, but like the red zone stuff and the big moment stuff, like this is not a Texas team prepared to execute or having great play calling in those huge moments.
I think,
for as much love as Sark gets, I'm going to need to see points on the board at some point, Ty.
I do think that's the confounding thing for me because we saw 2 gorgeous pass plays.
Yeah.
2 gorgeous touchdowns to Jaden Blue, where he leaked out of the backfield, was wide open. I mean, they got a good matchup. They were able to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
There were other instances in this game where it's clear Sark, as a play caller, is one of the best in college football. I don't think there's much doubt around that. But
I have doubt because I just listed games that they didn't score 20 points in.
But the confounding part is that you do have moments within these games, like that outside run down at the goal line. Just the whole goal line possession entirely left a lot to be desired. I guess that would be the source of the doubt. I still trust in him as a play caller, generally speaking, but
sure,
we've now seen more than a handful of these bigger moments where the play calling does leave you a bit wanting, for sure.
It's between the 20s, and that's fine, and it's great. And he called the best offense, arguably ever, that 2020 Bama team, right? The Mac Jones, Devontae Smith. Like, I don't know. It's just, this is how many years has Quinn Ewers been a starting quarterback? These are experienced receivers. This is an experienced offensive line. By this point in the season, experienced running backs. Ohio State has a great defense. Capital G, great. This is a great Ohio State. It is a complete Ohio State team. At a certain point, Texas has to score points and finish drives. And so with how they came out in this game and didn't really adjust until the second half. They had two nice touchdown passes. Quinn Ewers had the nice touchdown passes to Jaden Blue,
Yeah.
right? They were both to Blue.
Yep.
Um, I don't know. I came away from this game saying to myself, I think Chip Kelly is just out dueling Sark, Chip
Yeah.
Kelly and Ryan Day, because there's okay, they're taking away, they're keeping two high safeties. What are we going to do? How are we going to pick apart the perimeter a little bit? How are we going to find gaps in this zone defense that Texas is playing? And they were able to do it enough, and they were able to move the chains enough. And Texas moved the chains. Texas's offense in the second half was good. It's just it disappears for too long. There are too many moments, and especially it's just highlighted by that red zone. We said it when we were doing the stream, like here's Excelsior, right?
Yeah.
Here's the moment.
Yeah.
And it was the right tackle getting beat, and he's been injured and out, and he's a good player, but just immediately got beat, and that was ball game. And so they had opportunities before then, and to me, the story is the lack of Texas in big moments and Ohio State adjusting their game plan, knowing that they weren't going to be able to find enough downfield, that it's going to be G. Scott here, it's going to be Carnell Tate here, it's going to be Abuka there, and really the ability to hit that screen at the end of the first half.
Yeah.
Like you can allow a lot with a little bit of time left in the game. You got to make an open field tackle with however many seconds were left. Yeah.
That was really bad. I mean, you're going to hear me talk a lot about moments when we get to the Penn State Notre Dame game.
Yeah.
And every game has them, especially the big games, the ones that when you're doing the postmortem, those are the things that you train in on. That 75-yard touchdown at the end of the first half with seconds left for Trey Henderson. That's the key moment for me.
Yeah.
That's the key moment because bear in mind, Texas had just scored a touchdown. They just knotted it at 7. It felt like they were fighting tooth and nail to get any kind of advantage the entire first half. 18-yard touchdown, Jaden Blue, almost immediately thereafter. Screen pass, Trey Henderson. Nobody even touches them. Scampers for a 75-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
That going into halftime. Now, Texas responded fairly well. It wasn't like Ohio State, who got the ball in the second half, came out and blew the doors off them. I mean, their defense was able to hold serve, and eventually a little bit later on in the third quarter, they were able to knot it at 14. But that play, to me, the way it stole momentum from Texas going into half was very, very notable. And I thought a key reason why they ended up losing this game. Now, they lost by 2 scores, but you couple this one with what we saw at the very end with Jack Sawyer and the 83-yard fumble return.
Yeah.
I mean, those are 2 very key moments that if they don't go in the direction they did for Ohio State, maybe we're having a much different conversation.
I mean, I do not put this on the Texas defense.
No, not at all. I don't think you can.
That was a horrible play. And Will Howard made another great play on I don't know, it was 3rd or 4th down when Texas brought the house and was able to buy enough time to find a receiver. But Texas played championship defense. Ohio State played championship defense and mostly championship offense, or a good chunk of championship offense. And they were able to adjust, and that was the difference, right? It was in that first half, especially Caleb Downs making huge play after huge play in his whatever position we want to call him, the Ohio State savior. He's coming in at linebacker.
He's just the playmaker. If it's the video game, he's got the star underneath him, right?
He's just that dude. Playmaker. He's that gravitational player on defense, coming down and hitting dudes, occupying space as that 3 high safety. Like, he's just doing everything. And for the most part, there were some miscues from the Ohio State corners, but this was a sound game. JT Tuamalu was hobbled, and it didn't seem to matter all that much. His backup came in and I think swatted down a huge pass. That was another thing for Ohio State. Found themselves in less than ideal situations and got bailed out by just heady plays by these defensive linemen, swatting down low throws from Quinn Ewers, that low release. And, you know, if you want to say Quinn Ewers has arm talent in a way that very few have this season or in recent seasons, you're probably right. But as soon as he has to continue processing and like, okay, that thing isn't there, I need to move my legs as I move my eyes, then it dips quite a bit for Texas and their passing attack. And so Ohio State was able to take advantage, and they had more ways to win. They were ready to win sooner in this game, and it'll be fascinating to see what their game plan is like against Notre Dame.
Yeah, we can maybe preview that just a little bit. We'll obviously do a full preview in due course here. The other thing that I'll mention, and then we can move on, even though Ohio State wasn't as electric on offense in this game against Texas, you and I were both watching the Skycast from the Spider Cam, right, where we had a chance to see the kinds of throws, the decisions that Will Howard was making. For the most part, Will Howard is putting the ball exactly where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Now, that's not a blanket statement. Of course, every quarterback has their moments. But Will Howard just seems to be throwing the ball with such confidence right now. I don't see how he can't be confident after we saw those first two games. But he is throwing the ball with such confidence right now, and this offense is playing with such confidence. Just all the tools that they have, the many ways that they can beat you is a near impossible problem to solve. I don't know if Notre Dame has the answer for that. My hunch is no, and I say that as a Notre Dame fan. But it is apparent to me when you watch from that view that this guy is playing with a lot of confidence, knows the offense, obviously has the playmakers that can help once they get the football in their hands. So Ohio State wins by a 28-14 score over Texas. Their opponent on January 20th in Atlanta will be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Dan.
They've got one starting defensive lineman. They've got 1.5 starting offensive linemen. It should be great against this Ohio State team. Continue.
For those who are wondering, the early line, and I saw this before the game against Texas, the early line was Ohio State minus 8.5 against Notre Dame. My hunch is that will change. It may go up, given what we have seen from Ohio State thus far. 8.5. 8.5 is the number. 8.5 is the number. This one against Texas closed at around 5.5 or 6. Texas would have been favored by 3 points over Notre Dame. So I guess the math works out in that capacity, Dan. This game was on Thursday night. We did do a stream.
Yeah. You can get Ty's raw, unfiltered reaction, youtube.com/@solidverbal, the @ sign, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know what YouTube is currently doing. Yeah, we did a stream right after the fact for the more emotional part of that. Continue.
Notre Dame won 27-24 on a 41-yard field goal by Mitch Jeter in the dying seconds of this game. Whether you had a rooting interest or not, it got very interesting in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter, both teams combined for 31 points. It was mostly a rock fight before that point. But in the fourth quarter, things started coming off the swivel a little bit. And it got interesting. I have thought about this game more than you can possibly imagine over the last 24 hours. You know exactly what it's like to be
You
a
have
fan.
to evaluate both your happiness and disappointment in the same breath, which is unusual.
I think the right way to talk about this game is through M&Ms.
Okay. Continue.
Momentum and moments.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going like the candy-coated. Okay.
Momentum and moments. And I guess in some cases, the intersection of those two at the end of the first half when I think things shifted a little bit. This, to me, was the story of two halves. This was Penn State having most of the momentum in the first half. They were running really, really well, especially to the outside. The Notre Dame defense felt like it was on the field for most of the second quarter. Penn State got it to 10-zip after a long drive, and you and I were talking on the stream. We knew there was a lot of game left. It felt at that point like Notre Dame was almost dead to rights with how they were playing offense. It just was not an inspired effort. Then on the ensuing drive, Riley Leonard bonks his head, has to go out. They're evaluating him before you know it in the injury tent for a concussion.
Which the ref called for specifically. He saw something and was like, this dude needs to come out. And apparently there was nothing? Okay.
Apparently nothing.
Okay.
What I did not have on the bingo card was Steve Angeli, Notre Dame's backup quarterback, coming in, giving Notre Dame a spark.
Definitely.
In retrospect, kind of feels like Steve Angeli was the fire starter for this Notre Dame team.
Mm-hmm.
He went 6 of 7. Yes, there were 2 2 plays where he could have fumbled, one that was recovered. I'm not here to say that Steve Angeli throughout the course of that game would have done any better than Riley Leonard, but in that very specific moment, he was 6 of 7. He definitely gave the offense a spark, leading them down the field for a field goal. Just 3 points to make it 10-3 at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
That gave them some confidence then going in to the locker room, coming out to get the ball at the start of the second half. Riley Leonard comes back out in the second half. Seemed better. Seems like he played better, actually. Jeremiah Love, at least to start, ran really hard to start off that second half. Had an incredible touchdown in this game, fighting off like 4 tacklers. Notre Dame ends up scoring on their first drive of the third quarter. They tied at 10. It stayed that way until the fourth quarter, and that's when most of the points were scored. That is, in general, I think, the story of this game, and hopefully tells the tale of the momentum shift that we saw right at the end of the first half with Steve Angeli. It didn't really occur to me until I went back and watched this game again this morning how much, in retrospect, that series brought things back to Notre Dame. Like, they were kind of dead. And Steve Angeli just was able to get it going through the air, was able to give them a little bit of a pop, get something on the scoreboard, and they were able to use that to their advantage in the second half.
I totally agree. And I don't know if you're a Penn State person, what you're regretting in this moment. Obviously, there is a lot of disappointment about Drew Aller and the way that, whatever it was, 40, 35 seconds left.
There's 3 things. There's 3 things. There's 3 things, right? I want to talk about momentum. Now let's talk about the moments.
Okay, talk about those moments.
We talk about it all the time on this show. You got to win the moments in big games. The Angeli moment, that probably won't get talked about as much as some of these that I'm going to bring up here, but that was a big one that Notre Dame won.
Agree.
Looking back. Clearly, they deserve a lot of credit for finding a way to regain their footing, finding a way to win. As you say often, winning's a skill. Notre Dame's just better at that skill. There were 3 other very key moments in this game that, in my view, were self-inflicted wounds against Penn State. Penn State lost all 3 of these. The first was that drop pass in the second quarter by Nick Singleton at the goal line.
Yeah.
So the play is they get Singleton out in the flat. It's basically a walk-in touchdown. It was not a perfect throw from Drew Aller, which was the theme of the night, but he should have caught it. He should have caught it. He should have walked in. Penn State instead ends up coming away with 3. They decide not to go for the score. They end up taking 3 instead of the 7. That's the first moment.
Yes.
Self-inflicted. The second was the touchdown to Jaden Greathouse late in the fourth quarter. So Cam Miller, Penn State's corner. Jaden Greathouse basically broke his ankles. Put a good move on him. The guy falls down. Before you know it, Jaden Greathouse is unabated, like 25 yards of padding on all sides.
That's not like a usual occurrence. The guy slipped.
Great move by Jaden Greathouse. Very nice move. It was definitely fortuitous. I don't think there's any debate. It's fortuitous. Yeah. The guy falls down. Guys don't usually fall down like that.
Right.
The guy fell down either because of the move or because he slipped. Whatever happened.
Okay.
Jaden Greathouse, 54-yard touchdown. That was all it took to tie it at 24-24 and get Notre Dame some momentum back.
Yes.
And the third, and I suspect the thing that we're probably going to talk the most about the remainder of this episode moving forward into the offseason, is the Drew Aller interception inside a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Drew Aller gets the ball. They force a Notre Dame punt. Drew Aller gets the ball.
Yeah.
Notre Dame runs a coverage that Al Golden said they called once this entire game. It was on that play. They get pressure with Jalen Sneed. Drew Aller throws into the waiting arms of Christian Gray, who made a nice play on the ball. That gave Notre Dame possession inside a minute at the 42-yard line of Penn State. Before you know it, Notre Dame's able to center the ball. Notre Dame's able to kick the game-winning score 41-yarders from Mitch Jeter, Dan.
Yes.
So 3 unforced errors in my view. I think if you're a Penn State fan, you're going to look back on those 3 moments and wonder what could have been if even one of those doesn't go in the direction that it did.
Yeah. I mean, in the moment, I was wondering about the 4th and goal from the 2. Was that the opening drive for Penn State where they opted for the field goal? An early drive anyway.
It was in the second quarter.
Yeah, it was in the second quarter. So there was an opportunity there to try to figure out somehow, some way to get, like, let's be clear here, Tyler Warren direct snap into the end zone in
Right.
that moment. But no, I think that's all right. I mean, this is sort of an interesting playoff, especially semifinals, where you can say, yeah, the defense was a championship defense. Penn State put a championship defense on the field. They had Abdul Carter destroying tackles with one arm.
Abdul Carter with one arm was a friggin' alien out there.
Yeah.
He and DDS were true game wreckers. DDS had a interception where he dropped back into coverage and leapt up into the air to steal one away that was intended for Mitchell Evans.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they just have freak athletes at the edge. And Abdul Carter, the game that he put in, like you said, with one arm, it tells you everything you need to know about why he's going to be one of the first picks in the draft. He is unblockable, even with one appendage out. And Notre Dame tried everything they could to try and prevent him from affecting the game more than he already did.
I'm truly surprised, and I'm not surprised about the Indiana game, but surprised with Georgia, surprised with now Penn State, a ridiculous defense, that Notre Dame keeps getting away with Riley Leonard left, Riley Leonard right in these big moments. And it's stacking successful moments. It's 3rd and 4. They just need to create some kind of wall. And Riley Leonard, if you're watching this game and you're rooting for the defense, if you're watching this game and you're rooting for the offense, your tone is probably the same. We're just like, oh, Willie. Oh, I guess he did. And it works. It works for Notre Dame. It works for Notre Dame with limited explosivity. It worked, obviously, limited explosivity because neither Jadarian Price nor Jeremiah Love, who are normally the root causes of positive explosive plays for Notre Dame, as far as I can tell, it wasn't happening in the run game against Penn State for the most part.
It wasn't.
So it opened up a little bit in the second half, but we did not see that 71-yard run or whatever that we've come to expect at times from one of these guys. And the Riley Leonard thing keeps working. He had a huge, whether it was 3rd or 4th down conversion in the second half where Penn State brought heat and he was able to roll out and hit. I think it was it Greathouse again, or was it Faison in that moment?
I think it was Greathouse.
I think it was Greathouse. Rolled out to his left. He made winning plays. That's what Riley, I'm a doubter because I just want to see teams win and have the ability to win in different ways. And Notre Dame is winning with incredibly talented defensive players, especially in that back half. Like the Xavier Watts, Leonard Moore, Cyrus Gray, the linebackers were great. I know you're going to talk about, I'm sure, the beat up defensive line here in a moment or as we do the preview, but just the speed and ferocity and just how pinpoint those guys seem to be. It's Gunnar Stockton, it's Curtis Rourke, it's Drew Aller. I got things to say about Drew Aller. They are performing like all Americans, all whatever you want to call them. They're performing like a top tier defense that should, at least for stretches, give Ohio State some fits.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Penn State fan and you look at the box score and you see that you had 200 yards rushing, you see that you forced 2 turnovers from Riley Leonard, won the turnover battle.
Yeah.
You see a good, not by comparison, great game for Tyler Warren. You feel pretty good. If you look at this game on paper, you feel pretty good about what you saw out there. Notre Dame finding a way to win games like this is the kind of thing that gives me that feeling in the cockles of my heart that makes me wonder, is this Notre Dame's year? Is there a greater force at play?
Big old softy romantic about it. Yeah.
Are there greater forces at play here with how they keep finding ways to win games like this? That's not to say that Notre Dame is getting lucky when they're winning. I mean, that is not really what I'm implying here, but they definitely play.
No, I like that you're immediately staring into a higher power is smiling down on Notre Dame.
This is Notre Dame, is it not?
The most Notre Dame shit you could possibly do in this moment. Congratulations.
But I mean, they do find ways to win these games. They are absolutely scraping and clawing and inventing ways sometimes on the fly to win these ones, especially now with all the injuries that they have.
Yeah.
Which is definitely something that we need to address as we start talking about our national championship preview. Notre Dame again dinged up. They lost 2 guys along the line. They lost Charles Jagusa, their starting left tackle at the beginning of the year, to a torn pec.
Yeah.
He's had so long to recover that he had to come into this game. Now he's healthy to play right guard.
Yeah.
Anthony Knapp, their starting left tackle, went down, something with his ankle. Hopefully he is okay. They had to bring Tosh Baker. And so they are just nicked up truly along both offensive and defensive lines. They've had to deal with myriad injuries all across the field. Jeremiah Love still somewhat hobbled with that knee, though was able to be somewhat productive, scored the touchdown in the game on Thursday. They are just finding ways to get it done. I think a lot of that speaks to coaching. I think a lot of that speaks to the fundamentals that really they have up and down this depth chart, that they're able to plug guys in and not alter their game plan in any drastic way.
Yeah.
That continuity has served them pretty well throughout the course of this season, definitely now as they've gotten to, this deep stage of the tournament. So I give them a lot of credit for however they're finding ways to pull this thing off amid all the injuries and just generally with the style of play that they have on offense.
Okay. There is Notre Dame nearly lost a game while allowing 0 receptions to wide receivers.
Right.
So you can choose to look at that as like, ooh, you should be able to win that game a little bit more cleanly if you're a Notre Dame fan. But if you're a Penn State fan, is the basketball team good this year?
Probably not. They're
Probably
never good.
not.
No.
Volleyball?
They might be okay.
Did the volleyball team win the national championship?
Volleyball is good. The women's volleyball team, yes.
Okay. So that's cool. So you got stuff to be. I don't know how you go into this offseason after a game like that. And I don't know if the moment was just too big for Drew Aller. I don't know if he and Andy Kotelnicki and James Franklin were on different pages. Obviously, there's something to be said for the ceiling or talent level or disappearance of wide receivers. They have the most talented tight end in the country in Tyler Warren, and he was largely able to prove it once again with some big plays in this game used in different ways. I don't know how we get here as a college football community watching a team complete no passes in a moment like this to a wide receiver and not even really attempt anything significant to shake things up on offense. Like, if you're a defensive player for Penn State, like, how do you walk back into the tunnel and into the locker room knowing that you did everything you could to put your team in a position to get to and win a national championship, and the offense just had no clue what they were doing in terms of adjusting, in terms of trying something new, in terms of dipping into their bag on some level to get something going to keep the Notre Dame defense honest? Like, I don't know. It feels kind of catastrophic to me the more I've sat with it.
Yeah. Well, they got to do something at the wide receiver position. I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if it's personnel. My hunch is it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
They have to address that. They absolutely have to address that. It is borderline untenable compared to where they have been in the not so distant past. They just don't have guys. In this case, they didn't have guys who get open, and they weren't even trying to throw them open. So that's a problem that they're going to need to address. I'm curious to see what they decide to do. It wasn't a good game for Drew Aller at all.
No,
it just wasn't. And we could talk about the wide receiver position. We can talk about some of the issues they've had out there, but for as good as Aller has looked of late, this is about the worst game I've seen him play in a long time. It was really bad. He was bailed out of 2 other interceptions on far worse throws because of defensive penalties. I'm talking throws that weren't even close to getting in the hands of his player.
Right.
Ducks that were floated that were easy interceptions, if not for Notre Dame penalties.
The Notre Dame penalty, by the way, when Tyler Warren was in the end zone, and I think there were 3 Notre Dame players around him, and one of whom was called for pass interference, who sort of ran into Tyler Warren, but not with any sort of viciousness or anything. His hands were up and he didn't look back. And I suppose that's the letter of it felt to me like a very soft call, but if it's the letter of the law, it's the letter of the law. The only reason that play happened was because Drew Aller threw such a bad pass that he floated it to such a crazy degree that whoever that Notre Dame player was, safety corner, just assumed the ball has to be here by now. He had to throw it on some kind of rope. and it was just floating balls with no footwork at all.
I hate to pile on Drew Aller
It was a
because
bad game for him because he's not great. He's a pretty good quarterback.
I think despite the fact that, yes, it is a very thin quarterback class, despite the fact that our friend Bruce Feldman was talking a little bit earlier in the week about some smoke around, hey, NFL guys are interested in Drew Aller. Drew Aller needs a little bit more seasoning. I think we can put that to bed after this game. It was just not his best showing, not by a long shot. Notre Dame finds a way to get it done. They find a way to get it done amid all the injuries. I'm curious to see what they look like against Ohio State. Very curious to see what that looks like. Judging from the comments that we saw while doing our live streams, I have a hunch how most people feel that game's going to go, but we're going to do the sort of normal preview thing here on the Solid Verbo, and we'll give it its full due. Again, your final score here was 27-24, a big kick, 41-yarder from Mitch Jeter puts Notre Dame through into the national championship, Dan.
By the way, the good news for Notre Dame, they've got two great coordinators. Whatever it is that you want to say, that I want to say about Riley Leonard and Notre Dame themselves, like having to win in a very specific way, they keep winning. They keep getting those first downs. They keep getting into end zones. I mean, they didn't have I don't think they had a touchdown drive against Georgia, but they did what was needed to get field goals. They did what was needed in special teams. Like both Mike Denbrock and Al Golden have been calling great games against the bigger teams that they've played. It wasn't a great defensive performance, I think, against USC. I don't know. It feels kind of in the distant past in this moment, like especially since that Northern Illinois game. Potential de facto or whatever national champion Northern Illinois, depending on what Notre Dame does here. I don't know. They've been outstanding, given perhaps the limitations of the offensive personnel, skill wise, receiver, quarterback wise, and just the injuries on defense that they've just continued to step up and get stops.
Their ability to make in-game adjustments has been really eye-opening this year. They've done a good job on both sides of the ball. The thing that I am most concerned about as a Notre Dame fan, and it's no great secret for anybody whose team has played Ohio State, anybody who is just watching Ohio State from afar, it's how do you cover all those receivers?
Yeah.
Texas was able to do it because they play a different style of defense. They play a lot more zone than Notre Dame. Notre Dame, by and large, is going to try and man you up. They're going to have a roaming safety. They're going to try and get pressure. They like to bring pressure to try and, I guess, stem the tide, prevent you from going too deep on them. But that, to me, is going to be the matchup to watch. How Notre Dame is going to try to lock down those receivers is going to be fascinating. I don't know if they can do it. I'm not uber confident that they can do it because nobody really has outside of, a handful of moments throughout the course of the year. Texas obviously did it with the style of defense that they played. Maybe we'll see more of that from Notre Dame. That remains to be seen. But that obviously is the first thing that comes to mind. And secondly, Notre Dame's offense now has to go up against the same defense that has been lights out, that held Texas down in the manner that it did, that has been pretty good for most of the season, that held Penn State to 13 points earlier in the year. No offensive touchdowns in that game, right? How Notre Dame approaches that problem will be fascinating as well. I'm not sure there's an easy answer for either. It's part of why I think a lot of people are going to be in Ohio State.
Quintravion Wiesner and Jaden Blue ran for, it says here, 62 yards on 21 carries, about 3 yards. So I think it's fair to assume the running game probably won't be there terribly often for Notre Dame. Maybe they bust one and that's enough. But it's going to be interesting to see the adjustments post Penn State, and then after the first quarter, at halftime, whatever, on any key drives near the end of that game, if that's what it comes down to. But the initial read, they've got their work cut out for them.
They absolutely do. It'll be a rematch of a game from a year ago that we talked a lot about.
It was very close.
A lot about a very close game.
No Jeremiah Smith.
There was no Jeremiah Smith. There was no Will Howard.
No Quinshon Judkins.
But also no Riley Leonard.
No Caleb Downs.
Just a much different situation.
Yeah.
Your national championship again is going to be Ohio State against Notre Dame. We will be back to preview that game throughout the course of the week. Don't forget to go on out to verballers.com to see what our options are for ad-free episodes and bonus content and much, much more. Let me close out with this, Dan.
Okay.
We talked a lot about this playoff system
Yeah.
and what it meant for college football. Talked a lot about, at least I did, the semifinal round and how I expected that maybe there would be a drop-off in interest as we got into the semifinals, just because obviously interest in the first round with home games was really, really high. Interest in the second round with some of these teams getting buys, still, I think, very, very high. Once you start getting into the semis, though, you start getting more of the blue bloods. You start getting matchups, the so-called helmet schools, right? The teams that, maybe don't appeal to a broad base, but might tend to turn some fans off from being more interested.
Right.
Did you get that sense from these matchups?
No, I mean they're huge programs, so they're always going to have huge interest. The
Because that
Thursday,
was my
Friday thing.
assumption.
Yeah,
That was my assumption. My assumption was we would get to the semifinals and we would see fan interest drop off. I think I was wrong about that. It could have been because there was some new blood, right? We saw it across the board with 4 teams that have not been in a national championship in a while. So I think that helped.
sure.
I definitely think there was a real novelty factor here with this playoff to see how it was all going to unfold. I like the fact actually that we had games on 2 separate nights here in the semifinals. I think that worked out well.
Sure.
Had a chance to kind of give each game its own thing. So I'm happy to report, at least through one iteration of this playoff, that I think I was wrong about the semifinal. Maybe I'm biased because I had 2 teams playing in one of the games, but
Right.
at least anecdotally from what people have sent into us, it seems like the interest was really high and people had fun with it. So that side of it is, I
Yeah.
think, pretty cool.
We didn't have a new sort of out of nowhere, and thank God for a 12-team playoff, or this team never would have had the opportunity. They didn't make the semifinal unless you count Ohio State. If this were a 4-team system, Ohio State wouldn't be in the playoff. So they were able to take advantage, and rightfully so, of this new system. No, I mean, it's Thursday and Friday night, which is new because it's not a holiday that these games are on. It's not a Saturday night or whatever. So that's certainly new, but I didn't sense that much of a drop off in attention that the sport has been receiving. And obviously, when you go basically from Thanksgiving through the national championship, this is a like ongoing news cycle because of portal stuff and draft declarations and opt-outs and bowl games. And so there is going to be that huge momentum. Curious about the national championship with the NFL playoffs being in full swing by the time, there will be 2 weekends, right, of NFL playoff games between now and the national
That's right.
championship. So I don't know how that's going to affect the news cycle, but I suspect having Notre Dame and Ohio State is going to command a good ton of attention.
2 very big national audiences, traditional powers, blue bloods. Pick your adjective. We will see. That game is on January 20th. We will have much more on it. Again, you know where to find us out on social media. Hit follow, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of the episodes, Dan. Let's call it a night here. Again, your final score, Ohio State 28-14, Notre Dame 27-24. We're going to have a rematch of a game from a year ago, the 2025 College Football Playoff National Championship. For that guy over there, Dan Rubenstein. For myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, thank you for downloading, listening, and supporting. We will talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.